Okay, charcoal for this month's project for Creatures of the Night, which we're back to an owl, and we're using the same shapes as we did for the acrylic painting, where it was a monochrome acrylic painting, so we used a variety of blues. This time we're using charcoal, and we're building up the layers like we've done before. Now as well as using a charcoal stick to draw like this, or smudge and layer up with your fingers, you can also paint with charcoal. And I've got some Willow charcoal powder, which is ground down into a fine powder, which is exactly the same as this stuff. So if you're any good at sort of grinding down, do take a couple of sticks and grind this down, rather than buying yourself a whole pot of this, because this, unless you're getting really into charcoal, that is, this has lasted me years and years, which is good value, but I don't want you spending money if you don't need to. So you need a clean, dry brush, she says quickly, running for one. And we're going to use the charcoal in the usual ways, but we're also going to learn the benefit of applying it with a soft, dry brush. It is super satisfying. So here you can see that I'm starting to get the shape of the owl in, and I'm pushing the material in the direction of describing how the feathers lay across the wings, or how they might frame the face and arc the shoulder. And it's a beautifully soft way of approaching the same subject, but getting really gentle results, and actually really fast results, because you can block in your shapes and move quite quickly around the paper. I can steal from one side and bring it over to the other, or reapply. Oops, that's a bit much there. So it kind of blocks in your values super early on, and then you can come in with your rubber and start to shape it up a bit more. So I'm going to take this to the easel to show you on a A2 sheet of paper, but I just wanted to quickly demonstrate in the sketch pad. And of course you can work in on top with a harder application for the darker areas. So I'm just showing you a few things here in the sketch pad, so I can put some lovely chilled out music on for you as you watch me apply the charcoal on the bigger sheet of paper. So you can use a smaller brush to soften areas as well. And it's a really controlled way of just building up those layers that you want to see. Just tapping around the edge of that face. Obviously it's too heavy to begin with, but I can soften with a brush. And some of you actually might prefer to do this than smudge with your finger. And you can of course use your charcoal pencils once you've got your big shapes in to come in and get those fine lines in. Try not to do this until you've got all of your big shapes in, because you'll end up risking a good old smudge of any detail work that you've done. So save that until the end if you can. So what I've just been doing here is showing you that soft application of ground down charcoal just gives you a really gentle approach. You can then smudge in if you want to. You can use your rubber to bring back the light. You can use charcoal pencil to go in even darker, not pencil, stick, or a charcoal pencil to start describing detail. And just notice the different types of mark making that you can do on this project as well. It's short and speckly, longer and flickier. Direction is super important, so as you're going around that wing, you're kind of describing the direction of the feathers. You're kind of getting a shadow side with a bit more detail in. And you'll have seen me cut in from the outside and start to correct the shape and sort of slither down and get the angles right. So it kind of is more true to the shape that I'm after. And you can keep building these layers up bit by bit. It's a lovely gentle way of working. In fact, some of you I know have got the tinted charcoal pencils. If you get your browns and your purples out, you could do a version in those colours and it would be beautiful. But keeping it simple for just the black charcoal for this month's project. Just arc out that back a little bit. And then I'm going to show you, which I'm sure we've done together before, is grab a stencil. She says, quickly rummaging for it, and you're going to start to build up the background, either by just popping some leaves on and leaving it quite contemporary, or popping the owl into a tree, into the trunk of the tree, like it's found a little nest. I'll show you that on the big one. So that's a soft version, and you can get a slightly darker version by wetting your brush, sticking it in the charcoal, and you want to keep the dark passages to describe the foreground. So you can see a softer, blurrier application pushes it into the background, where something sharper and darker will come into the foreground. So you could create a nice sort of contemporary, let's hide that smudginess up here, a contemporary design by just framing the owl with some leaves, or you could pop it into a tree, as I say, which if I do that on the big one, you can get a sort of a good sense of what choice you might want to make there. And you can also, let's say the owl just comes down a little bit here. You can also use this with a rubber. Let's get some smaller bits on the go here, and rub out through the stencil. And that way you're playing around with negative and positive values, which makes the eye dance, it makes your painting interesting, and it adds layers and depth in a really efficient way. Let's see if we can arc that around. I didn't mean to do so much on the sketchbook, but here we are. Let's see if I can arc that way. I'm not going to wet it. Don't want it too heavy up there, so I'm just popping it in and then smudging with my fingers. That'll do us. I can decal bits of light coming through with the rubber as well. Anyway, that was much more than I intended to do on the sketchbook. Let's swap over to a big A2 piece of paper now on the easel and build up a bigger painting. But you've got the gist of using the charcoal in its different formats, whether it's pencil, ground down powder, or whether it's stick. you've been shown how to apply it with a dry brush, but also a wet brush, and of course a rubber is the way forward to get these lovely negative shapes showing through as well, and really useful for tidying up, but also shaping and describing texture. Piece of sandpaper will clean your rubber up really nice, or an emery board if you've got it for your nails, that works really well. Try to avoid washing your rubbers because it just goes, has like a residue that comes to the surface, and then it really marks your page. So try to clean just with sandpaper, or cleaning on a piece of wood will clean you off as well. Or you could slice with a Stanley knife and get a clean edge. So there we go, there's one example, and let's flip up to the big one now. So I carried on working and decided to work over some of the leaves and put the owl in the trunk again, trunk of the tree. And while I was working away, this was after I finished recording, so this is kind of like an afterthought as I was working. You know how you sort of sit back and look at a painting and think, oh, let's just try that. This is this occasion. So I decided that I would take the bark of the tree, or the trunk of the tree I should say, letting it take up 3/4 of the width of the page, but then at an angle going up to 1/3 of the page there. So you've got this sort of quite a dynamic line, and then from that some branches. And I've applied the charcoal with brushing on the ground down charcoal and then going over lightly with a charcoal stick. So I'll just show you that. So charcoal loaded up on the brush, and I can very gently get that soft passage in, just like we did with the owl, but that's going to be too soft for the texture of the bark of the tree. So by using your stick charcoal, and if you've kind of got like a rough surface, this board is quite rough underneath because there's been lots of people painting on it. So if I gently brush across using the side of that stick, that will start to give me some really lovely bark-like textures. And I don't need too much of it all over, because a mixture of that and then a mixture of going in and cutting in some really dark, sharp cuts into the tree trunk give a nice contrast. And I'm twiddling this charcoal stick as I'm taking it up the page, and it's the same for the twigs as well. As I work out, I'm kind of twiddling, so I kind of don't naturally do a straight line and make it look mechanical rather than organic. And my touch is quite light, so I have passages where it's quite dark, where I've been heavier, then light and thin where I've been lighter. And then obviously, because I went over some of the leaves, I decided to go back in with the rubber and get that nice contrast of negative versus positive using the stencils, and just overlay it that way. I've got nice soft passages at the top there, and then as you come down, I've got sharper, slightly darker in the foreground and the foreground here. And I could put even darker here, but actually I want the darkest area to be inside the trunk of the tree and also the eyes of the owl. And there we have it, from sketchbook to A2 painting.